Now, in the last lesson, we've updated our chat screen so that we're able to start typing messages over here. So we could say, "What's up?" And when I hit send, that message goes straight into our database on our Firebase Cloud Firestore. And we can see our new message pop up like so, right here. So that part is done and we're able to send messages over to our database. But how can we retrieve data from our database and use it to populate our app? So this is what we're going to do in this lesson. First of all, just underneath where we have our get current user, I'm going to create a new method called get messages. And this method is going to go into our Firestore. So I'm going to tap into that Firestore I've got and tap into the right collection, which is the one called messages. And then I'm going to call the get documents method. And you can see that this returns a future query snapshot. Now, this query snapshot is a data type that comes from Firebase, and it's a snapshot of the data as we have it in our current collection. So if I go ahead and call this method and I want to use the result of this method, then of course I have to await for it. So let's save the data that we get back as a final, and we'll call it our messages. And of course I have to mark this method with async if I want to use that await, and we'll put an equal sign in between those two parts so we don't get any warnings or errors there. Now, if we tap into these messages and we go into the documents, you can see that we can get a list of document snapshots. So those documents refer to what we have in here. See how we can add a document? Well, we've already got 3 of them, and those belong to the messages collection. So if we want to grab all of these documents, then we have to tap into the messages.documents. And because this is a list, in order to be able to view individual items in the list, then we need to use a for loop. So let's create a for in loop, one of my favorite types of for loops. And I'm going to create a new variable. We'll call it our var message in messages.documents. So this, of course, is the list that we're looping through. And each of those items in there should be a message. And once we've gotten a hold of the message, then we can go ahead and print that document snapshot dot data. So now this should give us that key value pair, the string, which refers to the field, and the value, which refers to the text. Now we just have to be able to trigger this method. And I'm going to do that right here where we currently are doing the sign out, because this is the part that's easiest to comment out. So we're going to get rid of the sign out bits of the code, and you can change this icon if it makes it easier for you. I'm just going to leave it as it is because I'm only using it to demo this method right now. So I'm going to call that method that I created just now called get messages. And now if we hit save to hot reload our app, then we should be able to click on this button, which I've linked to get messages. And once I've clicked on that, I should be able to see it inside my console. Now, mind you, the final version of the app isn't going to have people clicking on the logout button to view their chat messages. I'm just temporarily adding the code here so we can easily test it out. So what's printed here is all of the messages that are currently in my messages collection. The way that the code is working at the moment is it gets a hold of all the documents inside my messages collection. It creates a single message out of all of the message documents, and we print out each one of those and the data that's associated with it. So this is how we're getting hold of all our documents printed in here. Now, that's all very well and good, but if I go into, say, here and I add a new document, We'll leave the document ID blank and we'll keep the fields the same as what we had before, so sender and text. And I'll just put in some sort of sender value and a text value in here and hit save. And you can see that it's gone into my collection. Now imagine this was not me posting a message manually through the Firebase dashboard, but instead it was a chat message sent by another user. If another user posts a chat message to our database, it would show up just like this. But if we take a look over here, in order to get the updated value, I have to call that method again. So I have to click on the button again before I can retrieve all of my messages. Effectively, I'm actively pulling data out of my Firebase database. Yes, polling our database and retrieving the chat messages does work, but can you think of some downsides of using Get Documents to build our chat app? Why is this not the way that we would want to build it? Well, imagine that you're chatting with your friend. In that case, you want to see your friend's messages show up right away, right? And that means you want your instant messenger to deliver those messages, well, instantly, right? So to achieve this, the app would probably have to call Get Documents 2 times a second or even more. Now, imagine you say goodnight to your friend and you'll continue chatting in the morning. At this point, the last thing you want is your chat app checking in with Firebase 2 times a second for new messages. That's why we need a different approach to having our app poll Firebase for new chat messages. What if we could get the data to be pushed to our app? When new data gets added from your conversation partner or somebody else who has the app installed, you kind of want the message to be automatically pushed over and shown on your screen, right? That's kind of how WhatsApp and how most messaging apps work. So how can we do this? Well, in order to do this, we need to know about something called streams. Now, I'm going to comment out this method get messages, and I'm going to create a different method. So down here, I'm going to create a method called messages stream. And this method is going to, again, not take any inputs, but it is also going to be an asynchronous method because I'm going to use it to listen for the stream of messages that's coming over from Firebase. Instead of awaiting on firestore.collection messages.getDocuments, which is the method that is going to give us back a future, so it's a future query snapshot that we get back. Well, instead, the method I'm going to use in here is, again, firestore.collections to find the right collection, the messages one. And then I'm going to use a different method, and it's a method called snapshots. And this method, instead of a future query snapshot, it returns a stream of query snapshots. And this is almost kind of like a list of futures. It's a whole bunch of futures. And by subscribing to that stream, I'm going to listen to all of the changes that happen to this particular collection. And as the documentation tells us, when there's a new document that goes into my messages collection, I am now subscribed and I will be notified of any new results. So how do we handle these streams? Well, the easiest way to think about it is to think of it almost as a list. And as you saw previously, we needed to use a for loop to loop through all the messages in the list of message documents. We have to loop through our snapshots, which is basically kind of like a list of future objects. So at any time point, a new message could be created and it could be added to our messages collection, and we are now subscribing ourselves to that stream. So the syntax that I'm going to write is, of course, again, await. So I'm waiting for this to complete before I can use it. And I'm also going to add the for loop here. So it's await for. And inside this for in loop, I'm going to save the result of this stream to something that I'll call a snapshot. And that for loop is going to have the same syntax. So it's for var snapshot in this bunch of snapshots. And inside this curly brace of the for loop, I will now get access to the snapshot. And the snapshot has something called .documents. So same as what we've got before, it's a list of document snapshots. So I can again use this code that I've got from before to loop through my snapshots, although I might have to change some of the words. So it'll be snapshot.document, and each of these will be a message. And instead of calling get messages, I'm going to call my new method, which is the messages stream. And we hit save and we open up our console. And now when I go and hit the cross sign and call that method messages stream, then we should start subscribing to the messages in that collection. And we should be printing out each message into the console. So let's hit that button, run that message, and just as before, we're getting all of the messages that currently live in our messages collection. But watch this. If I go ahead and add a document, say on Firebase, and it's going to again use the same fields, sender and text. So sender will again just be angela@gmail.com, and value will be coming over the air from Firebase console. Here we're simulating another user sending a chat message. All right, now I'm going to hit save, which will save this document into my collection. And I'm doing this through the Firebase dashboard, but it's all going to the same database that I'm now subscribed to in my app. So now if I go back to the console, you'll see that it triggered a rerun of this code where, because I've subscribed myself to listen for changes to my collection of messages, as soon as there was a change, it's coming out over here and we're getting all of the results printed again. So now instead of pulling data from our Firebase database, we're effectively pushing data over. So this is really cool, right? Our app is now listening for changes to the database. It's not a case of polling Firebase and checking for messages as we did in the first part of the lesson. Now Firebase is notifying our app of any new messages via the stream of data snapshots. This is exactly the kind of behavior that you would want from a chat application. So in order to understand what's going on here, we have to understand a bit more about how streams work. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the next lesson. So head over there for a deep dive on what exactly are streams and how do they differ from futures.